There's a quiet lie sitting at the center of modern retirement advice. It doesn't scream and it doesn't look dangerous. In fact, it usually arrives sounding wise, careful, and completely reasonable. It tells you that retirement success can be summed up by one giant number. If you can just hit that number, you're safe. If you miss it, even by a little, you're in trouble. That is the story. And for a lot of people, that story quietly shapes years of fear. Now listen, the problem is not that savings do not matter. Of course they matter. The problem is that the number gets treated like the whole plan, when really it is only one piece of the plan. Your savings are worthless if you do not know how they are supposed to support your actual life. That is the part too many people miss. They chase a balance, but they never stop long enough to ask what that balance is supposed to do for them every month. The real question isn't how much have you saved? It's how much of your life can your income reliably support when work stops? That is a different question. And once you ask it, retirement starts to look a lot less like a contest and a lot more like a structure. Imagine walking onto a car lot. Every vehicle has a sticker price, bold, official, and a little intimidating. It looks final. But nobody with any sense stops there and says, well, that must be the whole story. You look at the payment, you look at the interest rate, you look at insurance, repairs, gas, and whether the car actually fits your life. Retirement works the same way, even though people rarely talk about it that way. A big retirement balance is the sticker price number of retirement talk. It looks clean in a headline. It sounds impressive at a family gathering. It gives people something easy to compare. But your life is not lived in headlines. Your life is lived in monthly bills, grocery trips, prescription costs, property taxes, and moments when the market is down and you still need to sleep at night. That is where the real test happens, not on paper, but in your day-to-day life. And this is where a lot of retirement advice quietly goes sideways. It trains you to stare at a giant target like $1 million. Then it nudges you to believe that anything less means you failed. Even if your house is paid off, even if Social Security is coming, even if you have a pension, even if your spending is lower than average, even if your life is far more stable than someone with twice your savings. That kind of comparison does real damage. Because once your brain locks onto a target, it starts using that target like a finish line. You check your balance. You compare yourself to strangers, coworkers, siblings, and people online. And then your stomach drops, not because your life is collapsing, but because the scoreboard you were handed may have nothing to do with how secure you actually are. Let that sink in. Some things in life are heavy but invisible, like carrying a backpack all day that nobody else can see. You get used to the weight. You even learn how to move with it, but it never fully disappears. That is what financial stress can feel like in retirement. It quietly follows you. Into the grocery store, into the doctor's office, into the quiet parts of the day when you are supposed to be resting. You can be sitting in your own living room with a cup of coffee and still feel that little hum of fear in the background. Not loud, just constant. And sometimes that fear has less to do with your actual numbers than with the story you keep telling yourself about those numbers. If the story is, I do not have enough, then every expense feels bigger. Every market drop feels personal. Every future year feels like a threat. That is why this matters so much. Because retirement is not only math, it is math filtered through emotion. And emotion shapes behavior in ways people often underestimate. A person who feels steady makes better decisions. A person who feels hunted by their money often does not. They may sell low, they may avoid spending on things they can afford, or they may spend carelessly just to feel some control. Fear does strange things when it sits in the background long enough. That is why a retirement plan has to do more than look good on paper. It has to help you feel grounded in real life. Quick pause. If you're new here, hit subscribe. I've got a lot more of these waiting for you. Let me tell you about Patricia and Ruth. Patricia is 67. She spent most of her career as an elementary school teacher. She lives in a small paid-off house outside Columbus. Her savings are about $280,000. And yet Patricia is not panicked. She knows what her life costs. She gets Social Security. She also receives a modest pension from the school district. Her home is paid off, her car is older but reliable, and her spending is steady. She cooks at home. She goes to church on Sundays. She still notices prices, but she does not feel chased by them every waking minute. Now look at Ruth. Ruth is 65. She worked as an operations director for a medical supply company. She did many things right. She saved diligently for years. She built her retirement accounts up to around $820,000. From the outside, Ruth looks like the winner. If you only compare balances, you would probably stop the conversation right there. But balances do not show the full emotional picture. Ruth lives in a high-rise condo in a city center. Her housing costs are still heavy. Her condo fees keep creeping up. She carries a mortgage. She wants to help her adult son when things get tight. She worries about healthcare later in life. And she checks the market before breakfast more often than she wants to admit. Here is the thing. Patricia has less money and more certainty. Ruth has more money and less certainty. It is not about who has more saved. It's about who has more certainty. Because once you stop judging people by a single account balance, you start noticing the structure underneath their life. A lot. A person with a smaller account and stronger income floor can quietly be more secure than someone with a large account carrying the whole load alone. Think of it this way. Your income floor is like the foundation of a house. Strong, mostly invisible, and doing the hardest work without demanding attention. Your savings are more like the furniture inside. The furniture matters. It affects comfort, flexibility, and quality of life. But if the foundation is shaky, no amount of beautiful furniture makes the house feel safe. That is how retirement works. Your foundation is the income that keeps showing up no matter what the market is doing. Social security, a pension, maybe an annuity for some people. Those sources do not always look exciting. They do not show up as a giant balance you can stare at online. They are quiet. But quiet does not mean weak. In many cases, quiet income is the strongest part of the entire plan. Because when money keeps coming in every month, your nervous system settles down. You stop treating every market headline like a personal emergency. Then you have your savings, your IRA, your 401k, your brokerage account, your cash reserves. Those matter too. They give you options. They help cover gaps, emergencies, travel, repairs, and the parts of retirement life that are harder to predict. But they are not the same thing as guaranteed income. I want you to imagine your retirement in two parts. Not one giant number, two distinct piles. Pile 1 is income that shows up no matter what. Pile 2 is the money sitting in your accounts. Most people spend almost all their emotional energy staring at Pile 2 because it is visible, it moves, it flashes numbers at you. It gives you a jolt when it rises and a sinking feeling when it falls. But Pile 1 often does the heavier lifting emotionally, because Pile 1 pays your electric bill when the market is ugly. Pile 1 buys groceries during a bad year. Pile 1 is what allows you to say, "We are okay," even when the headlines are not. Here's something I get asked all the time. Is it better to save more or guarantee more income? What do you think? But most of the time, the smarter answer is to understand which problem you are actually trying to solve. If your basic needs are already mostly covered, more savings can give you flexibility. If your basic needs are exposed, stronger guaranteed income can reduce a huge amount of pressure. That is why the right answer is personal, not theoretical. Real data can tell one story, while perceived data tells another. Perceived data is the scary headline saying you need a giant number or you are doomed. Real data is your monthly cash flow. Real data is what your actual life costs. Real data is whether your necessary expenses are mostly covered before you even touch your savings. That is the part people skip. And when they skip it, fear rushes in to fill the blank spaces. It rounds every future expense up. It pushes every income estimate down. It whispers that one bad year will ruin everything. And if you never challenge that story with real numbers, it can quietly run the show. That is why the real question isn't how big is your nest egg. It's how wide is the gap between what your life costs and what your reliable income covers. That is the number more people should know, not just their balance, their gap. Let me show you what I mean. Suppose your core monthly expenses are $3,900. Housing, food, utilities, insurance, transportation, medical basics, and taxes. That is the life you actually have to fund. Now, suppose your Social Security and pension together bring in $3,400 a month. That means your monthly gap is $500. $500 a month is still real. It matters. But it is a very different problem from saying, I only have $300,000 saved, so I must be in danger. Those are not the same sentence. One is useful, the other is vague. And vague fear grows fast. Specific fear can be addressed. Vague fear just sits there and quietly erodes your peace. You don't need perfection to have a successful retirement. You need clarity. That sentence may sound simple, but simple is not the same as shallow. Clarity changes behavior. If you know the gap is $500 a month, you can solve that. You can trim spending. You can delay a claim. You can work part-time. You can hold more cash. You can rethink housing. You can decide whether savings should fill that gap or whether another move would protect you better. But you can only solve a problem you can actually see. This is where a lot of people quietly underestimate expenses. Not the fun ones, not the dream vacation, the boring ones, the new roof, the water heater that dies on a random Tuesday, the dental work insurance barely helps with, the hearing aids, the property tax increase that seemed small until it was not. Those ordinary costs do real damage when they are not planned for. And because they are boring, people tend to push them to the side. But retirement is often shaped more by boring costs than dramatic ones. Inflation is like an ice cube in the sun. It does not melt all at once. It creeps, it nudges, it quietly raises the cost of groceries, utilities, insurance, healthcare, repairs, and all the little things that make up ordinary life. That is why inflation feels so sneaky. It rarely announces itself as a crisis in a single moment. It just keeps leaning on your budget. And over time, that pressure matters. If you build your retirement plan using today's prices and assume tomorrow will be close enough, inflation gets more power than it deserves. It silently erodes plans that looked fine on paper. That is the danger. This is one reason cost of living adjustments matter more than many people realize. Nobody throws a party because a benefit ticks up a little. But those quiet increases help your income keep pace, at least partly, with a world that keeps getting more expensive. That does not mean Social Security solves everything. It means the benefit has more long-term value than people sometimes give it credit for. But familiar does not mean small. And if you have a pension, do not brush past it like it is a side note. A pension can be the anchor of the entire plan. A check arriving every month for life is doing very serious work in the background. A lot of people mentally undervalue their pension because it does not show up as a flashy account balance. But if you had to buy that same income stream on your own, it might require a very large pile of assets. That is not a minor detail. That is a major strength. Think about this. If guaranteed income was the only thing that mattered, would you feel better or worse about where you stand? But once they do, the picture often changes, sometimes dramatically. Now let us talk about Social Security timing. This is another place where people get pulled into the wrong question. They ask, what is the perfect age to claim? As if the answer exists in a vacuum. As if your health, your job, your marriage, your stress level, and your life expectancy do not matter. That is not how real life works. The real question isn't what is the mathematically coolest answer. It is what decision best supports your life right now. Think of your benefit like a faucet. Behind that faucet is a pipe you have been filling your whole working life. Every paycheck and every payroll tax helped build pressure in that pipe. You have been paying into that system for decades. When you turn the faucet on at 62, the water starts flowing sooner, but the monthly stream is smaller. If you wait until full retirement age, the flow gets stronger. If you wait until 70, stronger still. But life is not lived inside a spreadsheet. For one person, claiming at 62 may create breathing room they genuinely need. For another, waiting until 67 or 70 may create a stronger income floor later. For a married couple, the decision can be even more layered. Maybe one spouse earned much more. Maybe one is older. Maybe one is in better health. Maybe survivor protection matters more than maximizing cash today. Those details matter, and if you wait too long to turn it on, some of that water never reaches you. It just stays in the pipe, unused, gone. No refunds, no second chance to go back and collect the months you skipped. That truth makes some people uncomfortable, but it should, because retirement planning is not just about maximizing on paper. It is about making useful decisions while you are alive to benefit from them. For some couples, delaying the higher earner's benefit makes sense because it protects the surviving spouse later, not because it wins a math contest, because it supports the household if life gets hard. That is a very different mindset. Here's a question for the married folks. Have you and your spouse ever actually talked about what happens if one of you is gone? But it is one of the kindest conversations you can have, because survivor planning matters. A retirement plan is not just about two people growing older together. It also has to work if one person dies first. What happens to Social Security? What happens to the pension? Does one check disappear? Does the survivor keep the larger benefit? Do housing costs really fall that much? Does the mortgage stay? Too many couples quietly assume things will somehow work out. Then life changes. And the surviving spouse learns the income picture is very different from what they imagined. A pension may shrink. One Social Security check may go away. Healthcare costs may rise. The house still needs maintenance, and grief does not make bills easier to manage. That is why survivor planning is not pessimism. It is realism. And in this case, realism is empowering because it gives you a chance to prepare while you still have options. This is also where people with big balances can still feel fragile. If a couple depends heavily on savings and one spouse dies, the emotional burden on the survivor can grow very fast. They may have money, but they may not have enough steady income. Big balances and deep peace are not always the same thing. You can have a lot of assets and still feel one bad stretch away from trouble. That feeling matters because it shapes behavior. Think of Social Security not as an endpoint, but as a safety net, one you paid into your whole life, one designed to catch you when you need it most. A safety net does not make you invincible, but it can keep a bad fall from becoming a disaster. That is why many retirees with modest savings have more stability than outsiders expect. The net matters, even when the account balance looks ordinary. Now listen, there is another risk people need to understand. It sounds technical, but the idea is simple. It is called sequence of returns risk. And if that phrase sounds annoying, stay with me. Imagine trying to fill a bathtub while someone quietly pulls the drain open every few minutes. If the water pressure is weak at the wrong time, the tub never fills the way you expected. Retirement can work like that when bad market returns hit early. If you are withdrawing money from investments during a weak market, the account can shrink faster than people expect, not just because of losses, but because losses and withdrawals are happening at the same time. That is the real danger. A person can retire with $650,000 and do fine if the early years are strong. Another person can retire with the exact same amount and struggle if the early years are bad. Same savings, different timing, different outcome. That is sequence risk in plain English. The problem is not just that the market falls, it is that it falls early, while your withdrawals are still quietly draining the account. This is why guaranteed income is so powerful. The more of your core life it covers, the less pressure you put on your investments to rescue you during a bad stretch. That does not remove market risk, but it does reduce its power over your monthly dignity. Retirement is not just about surviving on paper. It is about being able to pay your bills, make normal choices, and live without turning every spending decision into a mini crisis. That is what people are really looking for. You may already have what people with millions are searching for: a lower cost of living, a paid-off home, a spouse with similar spending habits, a stable routine, fewer financial surprises. Those things do not look glamorous in a headline, but they can create the kind of peace many large accounts never manage to buy. That is why comparisons are so dangerous. They make you overlook strengths that are already sitting right in front of you, strengths that matter deeply. I want to throw this out there. What's the one thing about retirement that worries you most? For some people, it is healthcare. For others, it is running out of money. For others, it is becoming a burden. Whatever your answer is, it usually points to the real planning issue faster than a giant savings target ever will. Because fear often reveals where your structure feels weak. And once you know that, you can start reinforcing the right beam instead of repainting the wrong wall. Stop measuring yourself against everyone else. Start focusing on what truly gives you freedom. Because freedom in retirement is not the same as wealth on paper. Freedom is knowing your bills are covered. Freedom is not checking the market before breakfast, because you cannot emotionally afford a bad day. Freedom is being able to replace the tires, fix the roof, or visit family without panic flooding the room. Numbers matter, but how you feel about those numbers, that matters just as much. Because how you feel shapes what you do. And what you do is what carries your plan forward over years, not just weeks. A person who feels steady is more likely to stay disciplined during downturns. A person who feels cornered may sell low, avoid needed spending, or underspend so hard that retirement stops feeling like living. That is not what all those working years were for. So what do you do with all this? First, figure out your true monthly needs. Not guesses, real numbers from your actual life. Pull up the last 12 months of spending. Look at housing, food, utilities, insurance, transportation, taxes, medical costs, gifts, and repairs. Do not skip the boring stuff. The boring stuff is where retirement plans quietly succeed or fail. Second, separate needs from wants. You need shelter, food, power, healthcare, transportation, and basic stability. You may want extra travel, generous gifts, kitchen upgrades, and frequent dining out. This is not about becoming a monk. It is about knowing which expenses are firm and which ones can bend if life gets tight for a while. Flexibility is a form of strength, even when nobody calls it that. Third, map your reliable income in plain English. Write down what Social Security would pay at 62, at full retirement age, and at 70. Write down your pension. Write down your spouse's benefits. Write down any part-time income you truly expect, not fantasy income. When your income floor becomes visible, fear usually gets smaller because the foundation stops feeling abstract. Fourth, stress test the plan. What if inflation stays stubborn for a few years? What if the market drops early? What if one spouse dies first? What if the car lasts 1 year less than you hoped? You are not doing this to scare yourself. You are doing it because a plan that only works when life behaves perfectly is not a plan. It is a wish. And wishes are not strong enough for retirement. Fifth, give your savings a job. Some of that money is for emergencies. Some is for travel. Some is for healthcare surprises. Some is for filling the monthly gap. When every dollar has a role, the balance stops being a vague pile of hope and starts becoming a tool. Your savings should serve your life, not the other way around. And if you are married or partnered, Do survivor planning now. Review beneficiaries. Understand what happens to the pension. Understand how Social Security changes after a death. Make sure both people know where the accounts are. Make sure both people know what bills exist. Make sure the household could function if one person had to carry it alone. That conversation is an act of love. By now, you can probably see why big savings targets are both important and incomplete. Important because they tell you something. Incomplete because paper is not life. Life is monthly. Life is emotional. Life includes rising costs, changing health, spouses, homes, habits, repairs, timing, and years that do not behave the way projections said they would. That is why one number will never tell the full story. Not honestly. Retirement isn't about how much you've accumulated. It's about whether your income can support your life. That sentence sounds simple because it is. And some of the most powerful truths are simple. The goal is not to win a comparison contest. The goal is not to impress your brother-in-law, your neighbor, or some stranger online. The goal is to build a life that feels stable and usable. A life where your money supports your days instead of haunting them. A life where decisions feel thoughtful, not desperate. That is what matters. So if you are sitting there wondering whether your savings are enough, take a breath. Do not let one statistic decide your emotional future. Look deeper. Look at your bills. Look at your guaranteed income. Look at your options. Look at your spouse's situation. Look at your health. And look honestly at the shape of your actual life. You may not be as far behind as you think, or maybe you are exposed in one area, but stronger in another. Both can be true. What matters now is accuracy, not shame, because shame freezes people. And retirement rewards people who are willing to see their plan clearly, even when the truth is imperfect, especially when the truth is imperfect. If the system only rewards you with almost enough, you will spend your entire life chasing more. But if you understand your numbers, if you build your income, if you define your life on your terms, you do not chase anymore. You decide. And that is the shift, from fear to clarity, from comparing to choosing, from a giant scary number to a plan that actually supports your life. That is where peace begins. If this video made you think differently about your retirement, subscribe. The next one goes even deeper. The point is to enjoy it.